Welcome to the Ascend Growth AI podcast, where we mix smart growth moves with a little AI magic. I'm Theresa. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Jamail Larkins, a trailblazer in the aviation industry, president and CEO of Ascension Aircraft, and president and CEO of Aviation Start. From taking his first solo flight at just 16 to building the leading aircraft sales, leasing, and management company, Jamail's journey is nothing short of inspiring. He's been featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 Entrepreneur, Goldman Sachs 100 Most Innovative Entrepreneur, CNN, and Inc. for his entrepreneurial achievements and leadership. In this episode, we talk about how he's navigating today's aviation market, the role AI could play in his business, and the leadership lessons he's learned along the way. Whether you're in aviation or just passionate about growth, you're going to get a lot out of this one. So let's dive in. So Jamail, welcome.
Theresa, thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, what profile. My gosh, so impressive. So let's start with your background. Tell us about your journey and what Ascension Aircraft does and also Aviation Start does.
So I actually was always interested in airplanes and everything inside of the sky from as long as I can truly remember. And at the age of 12, I took my very first flight inside a small airplane through a youth program called the Young Eagles program. I got hooked on flying and I knew that it was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I came from an average middle class family. Dad was enlisted in the Army. My mom was a physical therapist. So they had the funds to be able to keep a roof over my head and everything that I needed in life, but not the money for me to be able to purchase an airplane or go flying on a regular basis. So I had to kind of be creative out of the box once I found my lifelong passion. And so I started volunteering at the local airport. I was washing airplanes. I was doing anything that I possibly could just to be of assistance to other people that were already in the community. Through that, I got the chance to fly a lot. I got to the point that I could safely handle an airplane in solo flight by the time I turned 13. But unfortunately, inside the United States, you have to be 16 to fly a powered airplane solo. So I ended up going up to Canada when I was 14 years old. I wrote over 100 different aviation companies asking if they would sponsor my trip up there. Literally, it took 91 no's before I got my first yes. So I think that probably instilled in me that if you get told no, don't stop there, keep on going if you're willing to work for something pretty hard or if you want something bad enough. And then so after I went up to Canada, I became one of the youngest American pilots to fly a powered airplane solo up there at the age of 14. That kind of launched my aviation career. Became the national spokesman for the Young Eagles program, did a wide range of additional things, became one of the youngest airshow performers in the country at the age of 18. So I was flying aerobatics at air shows. I like to say I was like essentially the opening act for the major headliners inside of the aviation industry, like the Blue Angels or the United States Thunderbirds, teams like that everybody knows. I was one of the first acts that would open up the show for those teams. And I got the chance to fly aerobatics, something that I love, and basically dance in the sky in front of audiences that could fill a Major League Baseball stadium by the time I was turning 18. So that got me more involved inside the aviation industry. But while I was in high school, I actually started up my very first company, an aircraft that sold pilot supplies, products, and everything that pilots needed inside of the cockpit. And that company evolved over the years into Ascension Aircraft, an aircraft sales and leasing company. By the time I graduated high school, we actually owned 10 airplanes that I was leasing out to flight schools. So we had a small 7-figure portfolio of aircraft that we were leasing. We've now bought and sold airplanes in multiple continents, and we also do aircraft management. But most recently, we started up Aviation Start, which is really a company designed to get people involved inside the aviation industry. So if people need access to learning how they could get their very first start inside of aviation, Aviation Start's there to be able to help facilitate that.
I cannot believe how much you accomplished at such a young age. My goodness. Your family
I appreciate
really
that.
Proud.
I hope so. For the most part, I think they are.
And you said getting into is it hard to get in?
It's not the easiest thing to get into. It's not necessarily hard outside of a few obstacles. One, financially, it's extremely expensive to be able to get involved inside the aviation industry. So one of the things that Aviation Start does is it connects people with all of the different outreach programs as well as scholarships and grants opportunities that are out there to kind of help facilitate and make it a little bit easier for people to be able to get their start. But once you get connected inside the industry, it's actually really receptive, and there's a lot of support for people people that are especially aspiring aviation professionals that want to get involved.
What kind of aircraft is this? Is this private planes?
So you're talking about small single engine piston powered airplanes, 2 to 4 seat airplanes like a Cessna 172, a Cirrus SR-20, or a Piper Archer, for example. Those are typically the traditional airplanes that most people start off in, but it's also important to note that we're not just helping pilots, we're helping all sorts of different aviation careers out there. Whether you want to become an aeronautical engineer working at aircraft manufacturers like Gulfstream or Cessna or Textron Aviation, or you want to work on the airport operations side at a FBO like Signature Aviation, which is the world's largest FBO chain out there. Or if you want to become an A&P, a mechanic, and work on airplanes for Delta or American or United, there's a lot of opportunities inside the aviation industry. There was a really interesting study that CAA just released about 2 weeks ago. They're one of the larger flight training organizations out there that does a lot in the training space inside of the industry. 83% of all mechanics inside of the United States will be retiring within the next 10 years. 50% of all pilots will be new inside of the cockpit within the next 10 years. And that does not cover all the other aspects of the aviation industry. We, inside of this industry, if you're already in it, are aware that there's a growing aviation workforce crisis, and we need to do something to attract the next generation and get in.
Is that part of your mission, is to attract the next generation?
100%. That's where Aviation Start comes in.
Who are your ideal clients for Ascension Aircraft, and who are your ideal clients for Aviation Start?
On Ascension Aircraft, we primarily buy and sell small to medium-sized business aircraft. So it's anything from a small company that may have one employee up to medium-sized companies that need to travel for regional transportation. We sell everything from single-engine piston-powered airplanes up to medium-sized corporate jets that can typically seat about 8 passengers. Our mission isn't necessarily business aviation, and corporate aviation has this myth that it's all about celebrities and athletes that fly on a private aircraft. But the vast majority of people that actually fly on private airplanes are middle management. So it's not the senior level executives that are typically on board of these airplanes. So I try to focus my attention on those companies that have a need to transport middle management to different places for various reasons. On Aviation Start, we try to focus on just connecting people. So we spend a lot of time with high schools, collegiate, and trade schools to be able to get those people either exposed to the aviation industry or help facilitate their career and help accelerate it to give them a little bit of guidance.
I guess if it's middle management, or like you said, I picture like celebrities with the private aircraft. Is that more cost effective to do that versus have them fly commercial?
When you do the full time value factor into it, it actually can be. If you have a group of, say, 3 to 4 middle level managers that are making 6 figures, and you got to do a trip, that is a perfect example of something that I've done on a regular basis, where if I leave from, say, Augusta, Georgia, which is where I was born and raised at, and I need to go to a small town in Virginia, a lot of times there's not direct airline transportation that's available. So you're going to end up having a layover. You can end up spending a full day traveling to different cities, even on the same coast. So if you end up making what could be a 4-hour meeting into a 2.5 to 3 day trip, and you're paying for the salaries as well as hotels for all those people versus just paying for a charter flight, or if you operate your own airplane, just the actual direct operating cost for it, it can actually be more economical plus time saved of having people inside of the office if you utilize corporate aircraft versus actually flying on the airline.
Now that you break it out like that, that makes a lot more sense. I don't think most people think like that.
They don't, but that's my job to be able to educate them about what the costs that they're spending by flying on the airlines. And also, there's also some employee benefits attached to it. For example, if you can be home the same day with your family versus having to spend 2 nights on the road for a trip that you could do in one day, it improves the quality of life for your team members at your company.
Wow, that's a good way of looking at it. How about what geographical regions do you serve?
We sell airplanes wherever anybody needs to be able to buy it. So our industry isn't really like the phone book where people just look at a and go to Google or whatever to search for a company that they're going to select to be able to help them identify the right type of airplane for them, to be able to give them the proper consulting to be able to figure out the right airplane for their mission profile, and then identify the right airplane. So a lot of our business is word of mouth. We've been doing this for over 20 years on the Ascension aircraft side. So we've been very blessed that we have a good group of customers that have utilized us over time that refer us to their business colleagues as well as family members that need to be able to acquire an aircraft or come up with some sort of private aviation travel solution. On Aviation Start, it's nationwide. We're really a resource that primarily has a large foundation online, so anybody across the country can be able to find resources for them to be able to take advantage of and get their start inside the aviation industry.
Is it the same thing with the aviation start where it's word of mouth primarily is where you get?
So on we're trying to do a little bit more on the social media side with word of mouth. The target demographic that we're going after, we can reach them substantially easier through social media than what we can by word of mouth. Two totally different customer groups that we're going after or target demographics on Aviation Start, it's a ton of social media. On Ascension Aircraft, it's all about doing business the right way and then having word of mouth for a repeat business app.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we dive deeper into both of those business, let's talk about the current aviation market. Have factors like inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, have they impacted your business?
On a macro level, they've had a major effect on the business overall. If you look at the aviation industry, number one, aviation is the largest exporter for the United States out of any other industrial segment. So we have a lot of things that are going on politically in that landscape. But in addition to that, just look at the hiring trends that I mentioned earlier. 83% of all mechanics are going to be retiring within the next 10 years. 50% of new pilots will be inside of the cockpit within that same time period. But the cost of getting involved into all those different career fields is pretty strong or pretty expensive. Become a commercial airline pilot, and today you're going to spend between 110 to about $120,000 on average just to get the training. Then you still have to spend another 2 to 3 years of building up flight time before you could even qualify for a job at the airline. Mechanics have to spend between 12 to about 24 months on training in that segment, and that's still going to cost them over $50,000. So the cost of entry to get into our industry, and because we have such a big issue on attracting new people into it, it's caused labor costs to go up substantially overall. So that's had an effect on pricing on every aspect, whether you're talking about maintaining airplanes or if you're talking about acquiring them for factory workers that work at aircraft manufacturers. Everything's skyrocketed overall inside of our industry. So from a macro level, it's become substantially more expensive to get into the industry. It's substantially more expensive to operate and stay inside of it. So financially, it's just become a lot more difficult of an industry to operate in. And obviously, you're going to have competitors that want to lower costs to be able to be the cheapest option out there. And so there's a variety of different factors that are happening from workforce side to just the increase in costs on every aspect of the industry that's been hurting the industry overall. But with that stated, the industry is still growing compared to what it was 5 to 10 years ago, both in terms of employment as well as in terms of aircraft output.
How about AI? Are you currently playing with AI or where would you want to use it, if not?
We have not as of yet, but I think there's going to be some substantial opportunities with including AI inside of what we do. One, from just being able to, let's start off with Ascension Aircraft, being able to identify potential prospects that maybe have not heard of us by word of mouth might be something that we might be able to figure out some sort of AI tool to be able to help us identify qualified prospects for that. The same thing applies with Aviation Start, figuring out a way of being able to cost effectively reach new people to be able to enter inside of the aviation industry is another tool that we could utilize AI with. We spend a lot of time of qualifying leads on both different business segments. Anything that we could utilize to be able to weed out the ones that aren't real prospects would be something that's extremely helpful. And then long term, on just the client interaction standpoint, I think once AI gets a little bit better on being able to do client interaction, we'll be able to give faster response times, especially on things like, say, inside of the charter market, where people might be looking for a particular airplane to go from Miami to New York. AI technology will allow us to quote the individual aspects of that a lot better, and a lot quicker than what we can do today with human resources. And then I think on the training side, AI is going to do a lot in that segment. We're already seeing a substantial amount of it just starting to enter inside of the industry that will improve safety. It'll allow students to be able to learn how to fly faster and safer.
Can you give an example of a non-qualified lead? Because it sounds like you spend a lot of time on that.
So let's say with the Ascension aircraft side, you'll have people that will spend 2 weeks talking to you about they want to buy XYZ type of aircraft, and then you find out that it's not within their budget. They don't have the resources, whether that could be location. They might live in an area that can't handle the size airplane that they want. There's a lot of factors that go into what type of airplane that you're flying, and obviously the cost attached to it. It is typically more expensive to fly private than it is to fly commercial. And there's a lot of people that just don't really understand what the cost structure from one, acquiring the aircraft, and then two, the annual operating expense of it as well. So being able to weed out the ones that are willing to spend the money that's necessary to properly operate an airplane might be one. And then secondly, as I mentioned, geographically, there's some geographical restrictions that prevent certain types of airplanes from being operated at a particular airport. So AI could help us weed out certain disqualifiers like that during the vetting process.
So what's working well for you in both of your businesses?
In general, just macro things that we try to do at both companies that I kind of operate is, one, do what we say that we're going to do. Operating on integrity is something that's really important, especially when you're dealing with a 6 to 7 figure transaction. If you do the client right, then typically, and they're happy with the service that you provided or the product that you provide, they're going to be willing to share their newfound resource with colleagues that might be in a similar situation. So one, keeping clients extremely happy is critically important, especially on the Ascension aircraft side. On the aviation start side, it's just really pounding the pavement. Social media has been a great tool, but it's also substantially more difficult today to build a brand new brand compared to what it was 5 to 10 years ago. And unfortunately, with Aviation Start, we're starting on the later end of that, just breaking into building the dominance in this space of being able to connect people with opportunities inside the aviation industry. Is a little bit more difficult, but all that means is that we have to continue pushing forward and doing as much outreach as we possibly can to get the brand out.
Do you have a lot of competition?
In terms of Ascension aircraft, there's a significant amount. And we have a lot of people that are a lot bigger than us. We're a boutique firm that does, somewhere between 10 to 20 deals a year. But we really work with a small group of clients, but those clients that we work with expect a really high level of service. And so we focus on being able to deliver that versus just selling airplanes to anybody and everybody. On Aviation Start, there's not necessarily so much competition of a organization that's out there designed to be able to connect people with whatever resources they need to be able to start their career inside of the industry. But our biggest issue is, with that being a new entity, getting the brand out there to connect people with what the resource actually is.
I'm sure with your background, you have a lot of stories you can really motivate kids, right?
That's the plan. That's the plan. So I've been doing for about 15 years. I worked with the Federal Aviation Administration as their ambassador for aviation and space education. And we went to over 1,000 schools all across the country trying to get people interested inside the aviation industry. After being on the road for about 15 years, I took a little bit of a break. But now with all of this new aviation workforce crisis that's been in the national media here a lot this year, I've been called back into service, and I'm going back out there to hopefully be able to get more people involved in the industry and utilizing Aviation Start, hopefully connect them with some resources that are out.
That's good. How about what's been frustrating, or what's the most challenging?
Frustrating. There's a lot of different ways that we could go on that one, but I guess let's talk about Ascension aircraft first. The frustrating part on that would just be the capital is such a capital intensive business to get involved in. We do also, in addition to brokering aircraft, we have bought and sold airplanes over the last 20 years. And every single airplane that you acquire in inventory is expensive. So that adds up. Even if you're floor planning that asset, it adds up. So you want to get that asset moved as quickly as possible. So the capital requirements for the Ascension aircraft part is probably the biggest frustration. And the aviation start side, it's just really trying to break in a new brand into this entity, that knowing that social media is probably the best platform to be able to reach the maximum amount of people, building something new on there has just been challenging, but we're making some progress on it at the same.
For the capital, how long do you typically sit on one plane?
Hopefully not long, but
Okay.
I would say our average airplane, if we take it into inventory, there's a couple qualifiers that we have to have for that to happen. But the ideal goal would be to have that asset moved within 90 to 120 days.
That's pretty quick, actually. Well, in my mind,
Yeah.
it's pretty quick.
When you're playing that floor planning interest rate, it's not that quick. But overall, I guess it's not terribly bad. But yeah, the other aspect of that is, even if you find a buyer, depending on the airplane type, you want to airplane to go through a pre-buy inspection, which is similar to like a home inspection that you would do if you're buying real estate. But the problem is there's only typically a handful of OEM facilities that can do that. And when you do want to use an OEM facility for it, they could be backlogged for 2 to 3 months sometimes. So there's a lot of external factors that sometimes go into that mix occasionally, but on average we want to try to move an asset from acquiring it to actually closing on selling the asset within 90 to 120 days.
How about what metrics are important to you? What do you usually measure on a weekly or monthly basis?
So on the Ascension aircraft side, because our business is so much relationship focused, it's really about contacts with our current network. And so I am spending a significant amount of time keeping that relationship alive. So once we've had the opportunity to build a relationship, you never want to let that go stale. So regular communication and contact with clients as much as possible. And obviously in-person opportunities are better. So you have to be creative in finding ways of interacting with clients. That's not just a let me take you out to dinner, but you provide some sort of value to them. So whether that's taking them to events or opportunities that they may not be exposed to themselves, our goal is to provide some sort of value proposition anytime we do interact with the client, and to make it worth their time and that they're happy to receive the phone call or the invite versus it just being another just want to check in with you on our monthly check-in type thing.
And are clients, are they repeat customers? Do they typically buy more than one?
Yes. So if you do your job right, that's the good thing about our business, is that you do your job right and you treat them well, you'll typically be able to retain clients. But there's a lot of competition that as soon as somebody's name goes onto the list of them being a qualified buyer of aircraft, they're going to get hit up by every single competitor that you have, that you know about and that you don't even know about. So it is an extremely competitive field, but that just means that you have to stay on your A game and do your job effectively.
Is there a list where people get like,
Not really. Well, yes and no. In terms, if you buy an airplane, your name is entered into the FAA database of all the aircraft registered owners. So as soon as someone knows that you're a registered aircraft owner, you're going to start receiving calls on whether you want to sell your airplane, do you want to upgrade to another airplane, all sorts of different types of calls from competitors inside of the industry.
how about 6 to 12 months from now? Where do you want to be?
So on the Ascension aircraft side, I would like to close out the year with a couple additional aircraft transactions completed. On the aviation start side, we just launched that in April of this year. Our goal is to have 20,000 registered users utilizing a platform to connect to opportunities inside the aviation industry before December 31st. So those are my two big key goals that I have. And then we're starting up under the aviation start umbrella a new tour in conjunction with the FAA called the Dream Launch Tour. So we got 20 cities that we'll be visiting, hopefully to inspire kids to get involved inside the aviation industry.
Is there a minimum age that they have to be in to be registered with Aviation Start?
So 16 is our minimum age for them to be able to actually start taking advantage of some of the programs that are out there.
If you could wave a magic wand and solve one thing in your businesses today, what would that be?
Capital. That's an easy one. Capital would be number one, just because it is having quality sources, and that's the key word, quality sources of capital. Unfortunately, I've had bad capital involved inside of my companies before, at least in one of them, and that turned out to be an absolute nightmare. So having quality access to quality capital is a number one key thing that I would, if I could solve any problem, that would allow us to do a lot of things. And it's not necessarily spending the money, but being able to access quality capital is number.
And that means in terms of finding quality buyers, I'm
Uh,
assuming.
well, finding quality banks that you can work with. We've had, expensive capital that for collateralized assets that you're paying 15 to 20% on, which isn't sustainable really. And that was a hard lesson to have to learn, but that was definitely one of the issues. Having access to quality capital, whether it's for wholesale lines where you can be able to inventory airplanes, being able to find quality capital for your buyers. So being able to have banks that are willing to lend on airplanes. Every couple of years, we go through a cycle of sometimes banks love airplanes and then sometimes they hate airplanes. Right after 2008, when the market crashed, it didn't just affect real estate, it affected the aviation industry because a lot of companies went bankrupt or got rid of their aircraft. And so when that happened, it caused the actual values, the whole values of those airplanes that all flooded the market at once to drop substantially. So a lot of banks lost a lot of money on in that phase. So when that happened, it took probably about 5 additional years before banks got settled back in into feeling that airplanes were a solid collateralized asset for them to be able to lend on. And so those are things like that that does affect not only us internally, but also affects the buyers of aircraft as well.
What's a typical loan on an aircraft look like? Is it like a mortgage?
It's typically a mortgage, so you're looking at between 15 to 20 years. Typically, you can get between a 5 to 10 year or 5 to 10 year term on that, but with a 15 to 20 year amortization.
That makes sense. So you have such an impressive background. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could go back to day one of your career, which started?
Don't take every piece of capital that you can find. That was probably, we were in a really heavy growth mode previously. And so anytime we could find access to capital, I took it, whether it was the right capital or not. Today, we're substantially different on that. I'd rather have measured growth than just have explosive growth. And I think that's the way they will continue to operate.
How about for those who aspire to become a CEO or founder of their own business, what leadership lessons would you give?
Find a mentor in whatever space that you're looking to go into, and whether that requires you to spend a little bit of time of actually working at that company or getting experience inside of it before you branch off on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody says that you have to start your own company immediately out of high school or college to be successful. Get experience into how the industry works, and then the things that you don't like about it, modify it and make a better product or service. That would probably be one of my biggest pieces of advice is find a mentor. And then secondly, again, going back to the capital thing, don't always take every single piece of capital from any investor or bank that is willing to lend it to you. Find the right capital and the right partners to be involved inside of your organization as you continue to build it.
I can imagine when you're just starting, any capital seems tempting, though,
It
right?
seems tempting, and I've fallen victim to it, but it was my fault from that standpoint. But it was a big learning lesson, and I can tell you, we just don't take every single opportunity that presents itself going forward.
For my last question, if people wanted to connect with you or learn more about Ascension Aircraft or Aviation Start, where's the best place to find you online?
Social media is definitely the easiest way to connect on Instagram, Jamail Larkins, or TikTok, Jamail Larkins. Very easy to find, and then also on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you so much, Jamail. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you got value, share it, tag us, and don't forget to hit follow. Catch you on the next time on the Ascend Growth AI podcast.